Hi, I'm Ken Howard, and welcome to the Gay Therapy LA podcast. Today, I want to talk about the top 10 reasons gay couples break up and how to prevent them from my 30 years as a gay men's couples therapist. So, as a gay men's specialist therapist and life, career, relationship coach, and ASECT, American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, certified sex therapist, my clients sometimes ask about my perspective from having such a long career working with gay men as individuals and couples and polycules. And with some frequency, they ask what I've seen in terms of when gay male couples break up and other kinds of relationships. What are the reasons? What do they need to watch out for if they want their relationship to endure and to be happy? Even if they're single, they ask what some of the big risks are when you're going into a relationship. Now, every couple or polycule and relationship is different, which is why even with my long-term perspective, having worked with hundreds of gay male relationships, it's hard to make broad generalizations that fit everybody. However, I have seen patterns, and I actually look for those patterns. I have this joke, the older I get, the stronger my opinions get, because I see gay men making the same life mistakes over and over and over, but then I also see them very similar solutions to problems that work as well, over and over and over. So, for the list of common reasons for breakups in gay male relationships, I want to describe the problem I've observed in practice, but also recommend some potential solutions, or what clinicians call adaptive coping strategies that might salvage the relationship. However, we also have to practice what dialectical behavioral therapy calls radical acceptance, and that's that some relationships are beyond saving, because there is a fundamental incompatibility that makes a relationship simply untenable. And it's then that the most compassionate, humane thing the partners can do is to release the relationship, let it go, end the conflict and heartache, and allow themselves and their partner or partners to go out and find a new partner where that fundamental incompatibility isn't an issue. This is why gay men can have several or more partners in a lifetime, and not from being widowed, but from breakups that happen sometimes for very good reasons. Now, that said, let's look at some of the common breakup situations and how sometimes the breakup can be averted by a coping strategy that I'll discuss for each one. So number one is kids. While we often think of straight couples having the decision whether to have kids, gay male couples do too when they consider options such as foster care, adoption, or surrogate parenting. I've worked with gay male relationships who have done each of these, and there are pros and cons to each option. But that is after the partners have decided they want to have children somehow. When one partner does and the other doesn't, that situation can be the reason for breakup. This was portrayed on TV for a fictional lesbian couple on Supergirl, which was produced by the very prolific and talented gay writer and producer Greg Berlanti, who has woven LGBT affirmative storylines into many of his superhero shows on the CW. And in that storyline, Supergirl's lesbian sister ends a relationship when her partner doesn't want to have children. So what's the coping strategy for this? Whether or not to have kids, or at least a general interest or overview of the question, should be a part of not very early dating, but perhaps at a time when the partners feel that the relationship is getting serious, which may or may not include a monogamy agreement sexually, but might have a monogamy agreement emotionally, and certainly before cohabitating or getting engaged or married. Sometimes the reluctant partner can get some exposure to being around kids through the couple doing some short-term foster care, becoming involved in a local gay dads group for actual or prospective dads, or doing some childcare for friends or relatives. Other times the couple discusses very existential long-term life goals together, and whether raising a child or more fits within that. Some gay couples find that, all to be too heteronormative, while others want to fulfill a natural parental and paternal instinct with just as much right to do that as straight people. It can be a very meaningful conversation to consciously allow the ship to sail of the option of parenting, and it can involve psychological phases of life throughout the lifespan. It can also just be a practical thing. In my observation, it can be very awkward in reality to observe that options like having children through surrogacy is a hallmark of not all gay couples, but especially affluent gay couples who can afford about $150,000 that it takes to do surrogate parenting. Plus, there is the consideration of hiring a nurse or a nanny or a manny or an au pair if both partners have busy, often executive jobs that don't allow for stay-at-home parenting, even if many or most companies today offer paternity leave for men just as they do maternity leave for women. Often gay couples will utilize couples therapy for sorting this out and candidly working through the decision with the promise that whatever they decide, they agree, as much as one ever can, not to hold resentments about the decision later. And this is one of the functions of both couples therapy and relationship coaching, is that you work through really big questions like this. So number 2 is relocation. For many people, home is home, and where they live is where they always want to live, a town, a city. And they might have grown up there, or they might have family of origin nearby that they don't want to leave, and they might align with the city or state's values, such as being LGBT affirmative in their state and local laws and protections, or they might have a job they don't want to leave. They might have a strong affinity for the climate, such as being in a sunbelt state of the United States to be warmer and more comfortable, or to have mild weather, in part for coping with recurring depression or seasonal affective disorder. So if one partner gets the chance of a lifetime job that fulfills a long-term dream or a bucket list item professionally, the couple might break up if they reach an impasse on whether to uproot and relocate. I've seen both of this. Some guys put where they live first, and the job they have, or all jobs they'll ever get, has to fall in line with that. It has to be in their hometown. While others move around to move up, to build their title and salary history in their chosen field, and relocation is synonymous with upward mobility and maybe standard of living. And when I do executive coaching, which is another whole kind of separate service on my list of services for gay men, we sometimes talk about the pros and cons of relocating as a strategy for upward mobility across the lifespan. So what's the coping strategy for this one? Again, when a relationship gets serious, it's important to talk about values and whether the partners agree that their home city comes first or their professional opportunity for advancement comes first, and also which partner we're referring to. So straight couples, without realizing the inherent sexism in this, usually relocate for the husband's job, not the wife's, with some exceptions, but especially if he earns more and he's the primary breadwinner of the couple or the family. Now, I know that sounds antiquated, but I've seen many, many examples of this in heterosexual couples. With gay men, you don't have the gender pay gap, so either partner could have a professional opportunity among, for example, 2 high-level executives. In executive coaching, I help with that too, to clarify your professional values and your work-life balance. Just like couples therapy or relationship coaching can clarify the stakes of your emotional life together versus a reasonable desire to have professional growth and opportunity and achievement. The classic film musical that popular with gay men, Meet Me in St. Louis from the 1940s, deals with this, directed by the gay Vincent Minnelli and co-starring lesbian actress Marjorie Main, with the boy next door John Truitt, also a gay man. A lot of gay involvement with, and starring Judy Garland, of course. So, but when the patriarch lawyer father in this family is given a chance to relocate the family to New York from St. Louis, they ultimately decide to stay right there in St. Louis, site of the World's Fair. And in reality, the author of the book, Sally Benson, did indeed move to New York. So that story was really about exploring what relocating means to a couple and to a family. Number 3 is an unaddressed drug or alcohol problem. During my career, helping guys, single or in relationships, overcome severe problems with drugs or alcohol has been a common reason for them seeking therapy and wanting relapse prevention coaching. Sad as it might seem, when one partner has a drug or alcohol problem and the other does not, and there are many chaotic and unhappy dynamics going on, the situation can frequently become, either the drug goes or I go from the possibly codependent and enabling partner. And more sadly, sometimes the partner with the drug or alcohol problem chooses the addiction over the relationship and they break up. So, what is the coping strategy for that? I've had many rewarding experiences, serving as a couples therapist to help couples in this situation and helping them to identify what the work is for the person with a direct substance problem, oftentimes crystal meth, but it can be others, it can be alcohol too. And we discuss what role, if any, the remaining partner has in this without it becoming a codependent and enabling thing. And this model tends to work fairly well. I've seen this be successful in a lot of couples because it's an opportunity to clarify what the role is for the person with the problem and then what the role is for his partner without enabling and without taking responsibility for their partner's problem, but then also creating an environment of emotional support that helps the person to be at their best and to have their best chance for recovery. Recently, I even had an email from a partner in a couple like that I worked with years ago. And just for my information, they wanted to thank me for the help I provided, telling me that his partner was still sober and that their careers and their family were thriving. And that partner got clean, I hate that term, but for lack of a better one, and sober through couples therapy and individual therapy, and not being involved in the 12-step programs. And now those can be helpful, but in my experience, it's not required for a robust recovery. The professional help of some kind is required, but not necessarily the peer support help of AA, although I will say I think the 12 steps can make that process, going from messy to stable in your life to go a lot more smoothly and a lot faster. It's not required, but it's incredibly helpful, particularly if you can understand that program in the way that works for you. Especially if you want to take a secular approach to it and not so much a religious one, which turns a lot of gay men off if they've been the victims of religious abuse. But it's a sad dilemma when a couple has to face breakup rather than live with the daily drama of the effects of a partner or both partners being in the throes of a powerful substance abuse problem. But sometimes a breakup is what it takes for the remaining partner to be safe and happy, and for the partner with the substance problem to understand the gravity of how that behavior affects others in his life. This is the case, when you've heard of an intervention, when a group of people talk to that person and just speak from the heart about how that person's substance problem has affected them and the need for change. It's a tough situation, and I've seen couples and polycules in this situation with both happy and successful outcomes and sadder outcomes where just everyone goes his own separate way. Part of this is about a willingness and a motivation to do the work needed to change and recover, to get out of that substance's grip. Number 4 is monogamy versus consensual non-monogamy. This is perhaps the most common gay-male relationship challenge that I see in practice. This issue is so common among gay men, and I've helped gay couples with this thousands of times in 30 years, not only as a gay men specialist therapist, but also as a certified sex therapist, and taking a year-long course from the Sexual Health Alliance on consensual non-monogamy and polyamorous families with Eli Sheff, Dr. Eli Sheff. So emotions can run very high on this topic, as you can probably guess or know. And, some of my previous blog articles and other podcast episodes have examined various components of this. But in relationships, the emotions of whether to be or not to be monogamous can run high, especially based on your personality, family of origin dynamics, previous relationships, oh boy, that's a big one, social outlook, religious or spiritual beliefs, your sensitivity to abandonment, your trauma history, your personal emotional vulnerabilities, the presence of obsessive compulsive disorder, attention deficit disorder, maybe some generational issues going on, and certainly some national and ethnic cultural considerations. While we tend to see monogamy as a fidelity of the heart and the genitals or body sexually, consensual non-monogamy usually involves a fidelity of the heart, but not the genitals or sexuality. And polyamory would involve both emotional and social and domestic considerations of a relationship along with sexual activity. And it's up to each couple or polycule to determine somewhat early on what style of relationship they want. And this can change over time, with some gay male couples becoming consensually non-monogamous after a period, however short, however long, of being monogamous. And that can be part of the developmental changes in a relationship over time. And those changes can cause a lot of anxiety. And part of the work of couples therapy or relationship coaching can be dealing with that situation with the idea of saying, we want to go through this period for us and we want to come out on the other side as best we can. So there are pros and cons to each relationship style that you can choose on the spectrum between monogamy and non-monogamy. And you can't have all the advantages of both and none of the disadvantages. You have to choose the set of pros and cons that come along with each option, and its many variations, such as ground rules and how the relationship even defines monogamy, which can vary widely between relationships. But a firm impasse, often driven by a very strong fear of engulfment or a very strong fear of abandonment, can be the impetus for a breakup, with each partner wanting to move on and find a partner who shares his outlook. So what is the coping strategy for this? Well, there are many, and you've probably heard the previous episodes that go into this more. But I've found that the high emotions, especially anger and resentment and abandonment about this topic, are different from what the couple actually experiences later. Guys who start out with a high commitment to monogamy can become ambivalent about this over time and can have secret hookups that are really not advised, because going down that path of dishonesty is enormously risky, as your partner nearly always finds out, and not because they're snooping, which I have an episode about that, the importance of not snooping. But if you are supposedly a monogamous couple and you don't want to be monogamous anymore, then talk about it with your partner first before acting on it. That is so key. Express to him your reasons for your ambivalence, even if it's a fairly recent feeling, and just describe your emotional state, your sexual feelings, and your social feelings about why you want to revisit the topic of monogamy versus its many iterations of alternatives. Guys who are non-monogamous but feel almost tortured with insecurity and anxiety and jealousy because they feel pressured, or they felt pressured into being non-monogamous when they really didn't want to be, also need to revisit this issue with your partner. and talk about your feelings and what they mean to you. Ask your partner to discuss it, or even to experiment with a time-limited period of monogamy, and see where that takes you in your sex life and your relationship overall. That's a behavioral experiment that couples can do. If you're both interested in non-monogamy, but you're very scared that it will change your relationship irreparably, trust that you can have a discussion about your respective needs and then experiment, again, perhaps for a limited time, being non-monogamous, and discuss why that might be fun or fulfilling for you, and discuss how you might see possible risks and benefits, and your feelings about what are your hopes and fears. What are you hoping to achieve by this, and what are you fearing about the changes that you're making in your relationship? Often what non-monogamy is really like for a couple in reality is different, usually easier, than they had originally feared, because the basic attachment between the partners is still there. It is important to discuss the ground rules, though, about who, where, when, how often, and why sex with outside partners is to happen. And do not agree to a ground rule that your heart, among other organs, is not into. Mean what you say and say what you mean. Don't feel pressured into making an agreement that you don't really feel comfortable making, or that you don't feel that you could adhere to. Raise the objections at the time of the negotiation, not later. So this kind of event in a relationship is very hard to do without having either a gay or gay affirmative therapist who understands specifically gay men's cultural issues and how they differ greatly from straight relationships. Straight female therapists, especially religious ones, can have extreme prejudicial feelings against gay open relationships because they really don't get it, even if they attempt to. Part of gay affirmative therapy is being gay informed and culturally competent. If you mention things like PrEP and the therapist doesn't know what you're talking about, they are not culturally competent to work with gay men, no matter how much of a liberal ally they profess to be. And this is a big deal. Gay men experience a pretty serious invalidation and disservice by practitioners who have a conservative, insidiously, as in not even consciously acknowledged, religious bias, or even just a social bias, even if they're not religious, but they still have this bias against non-monogamy because they're being influenced by a conservative value that they may not even be conscious of. So even gay male therapists can have a bias against this, and that's their issue, not yours, especially if they were influenced by covert, unconscious religious or socially conservative thinking. Still practicing from a heterosexist lens because they've not processed their own trauma of being the victim of a previous gay partner's dishonesty, or they're indoctrinated with the pseudoscience religious bigotry wrapped in clinical garb of sex addiction or porn addiction models, as far too many gay-identified male therapists do lately. I've worked successfully with monogamous gay couples or non-monogamous gay couples and polycules, and especially those who are on some kind of spectrum between the two. Happiness is possible when this issue comes up, but it takes a lot of support and a lot of discussion to resolve. It's not an easy issue in the life of a couple or of a polycule, and this is where professional help can really help you work through such a multifaceted conflict or situation. So number 5 is disagreement over household chores and money. So while this might seem petty, I've seen gay couples break up over the resentment that can come from imbalances in who is doing household chores, or if there's a great difference in the partner's incomes. And a previous episode talks about that when your incomes differ greatly. And since there's no wife in gay relationships among gay men, the domestic chores that women historically were expected to do for centuries, until modern feminism, and even then, women tend to do more domestic chores than men even now. Even if you look at the most progressive modern families, you still see women doing more domestic roles. This supermom have to be everything kind of role that women feel pressure about. And now, in a gay relationship, they have to be done by either of the two or more men. Men who feel that they are doing more than their fair share of chores can feel emasculated, even unconsciously, about doing women's work. A term their father might have used in their family of origin, or even resentments about the spectrum and balance of entitlement versus deprivation. This comes up a lot in couples, this business of feeling entitled to something versus feeling deprived of something. And that's the origin a lot of times of resentment against a partner, is your needs not being met in some way. So no one likes to feel, objectified as, the housekeeper or the daddy with money stereotype. Usually, couples therapy or relationship coaching can help to rebalance the burden of regular household chores or the balance of income and money issues. This is where a lot of behavioral therapy perspectives come in about what can we change about our attitudes, but then also what can we actually change about the nitty-gritty, our day-to-day behaviors, what needs to change for us to feel better. But there are times when a couple will break up over these items, and it's more from the state of chronic resentment about them. So what's the coping strategy? First, it's accepting that household chores are a fact of life if you don't want to live in squalor. While some guys hire a housekeeper if their resources permit, there are still chores that even guys tired from full-time jobs still have to do. It's part of adulting and a necessary evil in running a household. If one partner or both feel that there is an unfair imbalance of chores, or who is paying for what, just in the practical household living, it is so critical to air your grievances, talk it out, and then propose and implement and evaluate and readjust practical compromises. Such as working from a written who does what chores list that's posted on the refrigerator. Because often couples therapy reveals that resentment about chores or money are actually about something else, such as jealousy of other men or sexual dissatisfaction. It's the smoke of a different fire. And therapy can help uncover the real issue before it erodes goodwill in the relationship and breeds resentment and leads to a sad and unnecessary breakup. Number 6 is about family of origin and conflicted loyalty. So some gay couples are at risk of breaking up if they violate the basic commitment between or among the partners. So in my blog articles or other podcast episodes, I've discussed how the basic building blocks of enduring and rewarding relationships are commitment, communication, and compromise. Mastering those skills goes a long way in fortifying and sustaining your relationships, and they're remarkably reliable for solving many problems. That's how I came up with those, because after years and years of doing couples therapy for gay men, it really did boil down to the nature of your commitment to each other, how good your communication skills are. Very often in couples therapy or relationship coaching, guys will say to me, we don't communicate well. We have lousy communication skills. And then that's the work, is to take those up a notch or two. And then the art of compromise, understanding, not an infantile thinking of I want what I want and I want it right now. It's compromise. You give a little to get a little, and you creatively compromise and say, okay, what kind of changes in very concrete behavioral terms might work for us moving forward. But, that commitment part has to be clear. While some straight men can feel conflicted between loyalty to their wife and loyalty to, say, their mother or their parents, it is more rare than with gay men. Gay men sometimes fail themselves to treat their own gay relationship with the seriousness and validity they do to straight relationships. And this is a form of internalized homophobia. When a gay partner is putting the needs of his mother, most frequently, or anyone in his family of origin, long after he's grown up and left home and created a home with a partner, over his partner, he is undermining and devaluing his partner in a way that seems to say that gay relationships, including his own, are not as important as straight ones. I've seen gay partners throw their partners under the bus way more than straight men would. If it has to be a choice between loyalty to your parents and your family of origin and your partner, it is critical that you choose your partner, except in cases like crime or domestic violence. I've seen gay couples break up because a partner doesn't feel that his partner values him as much as he does his family of origin. And this is sad because it signals that his partner is not yet really grown up and gone through the separation and individuation stage from childhood to adolescent to adult. This is especially true if the partner is doing something to appease his parents and diss his partner due to financial dependence or a fear of being cut out of dad's will. So what's the coping strategy? If you feel that your partner is not committing to you and demonstrating loyalty to you, within reason, of course, forsaking all other, as the marriage vows say, then your relationship needs support and work to survive. Couples therapy can help this, but it starts with proposing to your partner that you have and demonstrate a commitment that puts your partner first, much like the text of wedding vows. So if a parent is disabled or somehow dependent on adult children for things like financial support or caregiving for the elderly, this is something that the partners must discuss to determine what they can and cannot do in terms of their time and their budget and their attention. They can't have one partner giving a lot of money to his parents if it undermines the couple's long-term financial security in their own retirement plan, for example. A very gay-savvy certified financial planner can help with this. It's also important to discuss possible unconscious resistance or devaluation of a partner due to covert internalized homophobia or even a sense of guilt about the partner feels that he has to make it up to his parents or his family of origin for being gay in the first place. Susie Orman, the lesbian financial planner, has talked about this when she says it is very important not to give so much money to your somewhat dependent parents or to your children that you're impoverishing your own along with your partner or spouse, your long-term financial security. This is why people need certified financial planners, especially gay men, because money issues come up a lot, and money is often related to values or a sense of priority. If you're giving a lot of money to your deadbeat brother or your mess of a sister, then that could be undermining the financial security of your home with your partner. And that can get into codependency issues and substance abuse and unresolved issues with parents. So number 7 is pathological jealousy and control issues. Boy, this is a big one. Another very common reason for breakups that I've seen a number of times in practice is that the couple comes to an impasse when one partner simply has so much pathological jealousy of his partner and his partner's even casual attention to other guys that he just can't stand it. And so when a partner stifles his partner's sense of privacy and independence and autonomy and self-agency and self-efficacy and a basic right to self-determination of your life, the resentment from his partner for being mistrusted or infantilized or undermined or controlled can lead to the only escape from this being breakup. I've seen this especially in older partners toward younger partners who seem to be jealous and anxious about their younger partner's contact with any other peer gay men. That way lies madness, because pathological jealousy and control and demanding accountability of your partner's time, where have you been, who have you been with, is a dramatically efficient recipe for breakup. There has to be commitment, like I said, but there also has to be balance with that of a sense of autonomy, particularly for men, because nobody, no male, wants to be controlled by either a female wife or a male partner. Men have this thing in the animal kingdom about wanting independence. And that doesn't necessarily mean independence to cheat on your partner. I don't mean those extremes. I mean, the ability to have different hobbies, to have different friends, and to have different interests, and to make that okay. You don't have to be aligned or conjoined twins, right, with absolutely everything being together. So what's the coping strategy for this whole idea of pathological jealousy and control? Assuming that there isn't any actual infidelity or dishonesty going on, a partner who can't seem to control and self-soothe his own abandonment and anxiety and fears of loss needs to see a therapist to learn what we call emotional self-regulation skills, or self-soothing skills, cognitive reframing skills, and communication skills on how to build intimacy with a partner and have your partner want to be with you instead of feeling like he has to be with you. A severe sensitivity to real or imagined abandonment is a hallmark symptom of the borderline personality disorder, and this needs treatment, often through dialectical behavioral therapy. A narcissistic partner might also have the point of view that only his needs are valid and might ignore his partner's respective set of needs. A partner who is a trauma survivor, for example, might have difficulty being alone or trusting those he loves not to hurt him, and this would need therapy for healing from those traumatic experiences. So it's about recognizing that even in a close relationship, each partner still has the right to autonomy and privacy and latitude to have their own needs and interests and hobbies and social roles, even if it's all non-sexual with others. Guys with extreme jealousy are likely survivors of some kind of traumatic loss who don't expect their partners or anyone really to really ever be there for them, unless they are contracted and coerced and practically imprisoned. If guys like that want to sustain their relationship, they need to negotiate some room for mutual independence and some breathing room in the relationship, including the most intimate relationships. Number 8 is sex. Yep, couples can and do break up over sexual boredom. In the gay icon sitcom classic The Golden Girls, the storyline for B. Arthur's character, Dorothy, was that her husband Stan left her and divorced her after 38 years of marriage because he wasn't happy in the sack. And then he had a brief relationship with a much younger flight attendant woman. In real life, by the way, B. Arthur's husband, the director Gene Saks, who directed her in Mame, left her after many years of marriage to be with a younger man, which that might have been the inspiration for Dorothy's backstory. And the other 3 roommates on The Golden Girls were widows. And it's extremely common that in both straight and gay relationships, sexual excitement can wane over time, especially after the first few years even, early. And, if you're lucky, the couple experiences a brief time of hot sex that cools to a lifetime of warm sex. As my cherished mentor, a very early gay men's specialist therapist, Michael Chernoff in New York, has said. So what's the coping strategy? When sexual boredom settles in, or conversely sexual interest in others increases, it's time for the partners to discuss their options. Sex therapy, which I also provide as a trained ASEX certified sex therapist, can help a couple or a relationship find new ways to renew and invigorate their sex life, either between the partners or by adding others together, such as 3 ways or 4 ways together, or negotiating some kind of consensual non-monogamy to address simply very primal sexual needs without undermining the emotional and romantic and profound domestic life they have together. Couples who have sexual problems who don't reach out for help are at risk of being overwhelmed by their powerful sexual feelings, either their drive or desire for better sex or their resentment at the deprivation of it, and they just break up. And that's kind of an unnecessary outcome, because with help, often a sexual frustration or impasse can be overcome or at least partially mitigated. Plus, there is the importance of accepting that hot sex is inherently time-limited, physiologically and physically, neurobiologically, and it's only natural for a man's body, straight and gay, to crave what we call novel stimulation. Even if the novel stimulation does not come from a new partner, it's possible in monogamy to create novel stimulation, but from doing different things with your existing partner. But the need for novel stimulation is very consistently universal among guys. So number 9 is domestic violence. This one's short. If there's domestic violence, it is extremely likely that the relationship is over, because it needs to be. Domestic violence can be, for a certain number of people, men and women per year, lethal. Couples counseling is not indicated or recommended for couples where violence is present. Domestic violence in gay men's relationship is especially dangerous because men can be strong and do a lot of damage to their home or to their partner's person just due to their strength, especially if they're also disinhibited by alcohol, as is often the case, or stimulant drugs like cocaine or crystal. So what's the coping strategy? Well, domestic violence is a really big topic, and it needs its own discussion to adequately begin to address it. But the primary topic is safety first for the partners, which means being away and protected from the dangerous behavior of the perpetrator or each other if the violence is mutual, which it can be between two men who've been socialized. Men have been socialized to be physical fighters, with children growing up seeing prize fights on TV or barroom brawls or action movie hand-to-hand combat. We get a lot of behavioral modeling that it's okay to beat the crap out of somebody. So if you're experiencing domestic violence, it is important to seek out and search resources, community organizations who have competence, number one, and willingness. That's the big one. And that's not a given by any means, for specifically gay male victims of domestic violence. Part of the misogyny of society is that domestic violence against women is a global pandemic and overwhelming. It's a grave injustice in nearly all cultures for all history. But part of the misandry of society is assuming that big men can never be victims of domestic violence or sexual assault when they indeed can. I've worked with dozens of these guys. The most important dynamic is safety, usually through separation. And in these cases, a clean break by a permanent, keyword, breakup is the best option, and not just going back for all the psychological reasons that people go back. I've only seen gay couples survive any kind of domestic violence when it's a one-time thing, and even that needs a lot of intervention support, before one time becomes dozens of times, and the trauma bond makes it hard for the victim to leave later. And then that's a really big topic, and I don't mean to gloss over it so quickly on just a list of reasons people break up. And if domestic violence is your situation, you need a whole other collection of support. But definitely domestic violence is one of the greatest reasons for breakup, and that's usually a good thing because it means that the person can be safe, and they often blossom after getting out of that situation. I've seen that a lot. So the last one, number 10, is widowhood. Now that really isn't a breakup scenario, but it is a scenario where a relationship ends. If you lose a spouse to death or a partner, that's not a breakup or a divorce, but you are single again after that, when you don't want to be. Michael Chernoff, who I mentioned earlier, was the editor of a book called Gay Widowers, with a lot of stories about gay men who lost partners to AIDS, but also to other causes, accidents, cancer, heart attacks, all the way that people die in our society now. Gay widowers have the double challenge of not only having to deal with the catastrophic loss of their partner, but they can also have their grief undermined or invalidated by not being recognized by society as on a par with the loss of a straight spouse or partner. But, oh, just a friend, and oh, that's different, which is horrifying. So, what is the coping strategy? I've worked with several gay widowers, and it's a familiar pattern about mourning the loss, processing the grief, and moving on with life, including coming to terms with the loss in a way that allows for the healing necessary to be emotionally available for a next relationship. It is sad work because losing a spouse has long been considered the worst experience that a human can go through, straight or gay, rivaled only by maybe the loss of a child. And yet, it's not uncommon, especially among older gay men. The coping is an emotional, existential, and even social experience. If we use our Golden Girls TV examples, where the three widowers went on to form a certain platonic intimacy and sisterly love with their roommates, despite being straight, and their financial situation is not that unlike real-life examples, as women tend to lose husbands more often than the other way around, possibly due to the lower life expectancies in men who have endured overall a lifetime of more work stress in high-demand jobs, although this might change demographically as more women have been in the workforce for decades. It's especially difficult because the partners did not voluntarily or mutually break up. The permanent situation or separation was thrust upon them, often in unexpected or sudden and unjust ways. Coping becomes an existential life exercise, again, aided by a therapist or a support group or a life coach, for understanding that you need to process the loss, but at the same time understand that you're still alive and there's a quality of life for you after a tragic loss that is there for you. And it doesn't bring the person back, but it does mean that there is a coping with the loss over the long term. So, in conclusion, the ones that are listed here, these 10, are not the only reasons for a breakup. There are perhaps as many different causes of breakups as there are breakups. But I'm hoping by discussing the most frequent ones I've seen in my long period of clinical practice that I can offer hope if you're facing one or more of these situations, and perhaps can run some preemptive interference that might avert a breakup. But we also need to challenge this idea that relationships must last no matter what. Sometimes it is a humane and healthy thing to recognize that a relationship has just run its course, and moving on is an opportunity for personal growth. Now, I admit I have a bias somewhat against this because I generally believe couples, gay male couples, want to have both a long and happy life together, and I believe they deserve to have the help and support they need from an external support source, like a therapist or a relationship coach, which are two somewhat overlapping but still distinct professional services. I also believe in the parity. If you've watched your parents or your siblings, and especially your grandparents, have a long and reasonably happy relationship, I believe that gay men are entitled to that as well. There's nothing wrong with gay relationships that they end prematurely or end more often than straight ones. Even straight ones have something like a 50% divorce rate. And I think a lot of that, straight and gay in breakups, is because the relationship is not getting the support they need, to work through it. They're at an impasse and they think their only option is to break up, when in reality there's lots of alternatives to breaking up. So if you need support for any one of these 10 situations or others in your relationship, or even challenges that you face as an individual, please consider therapy for residents of California, where I'm licensed, or coaching in other states and countries. And I can explain those differences when we talk. And for more information on how to become a client through telehealth from anywhere in the world, you can email me, ken@gaytherapyla.com, or ken@gaycoachingla.com. Take your choice. I'll get the message. Or you can call me, or preferably text me in the United States, 310-339-5778. It's the same thing on WhatsApp, 310-339-5778. I would be happy to help. Stay tuned. In the near future, I'm going to be offering some webinars that you can purchase on all kinds of gay men's topics. And if you have suggestions for topics on webinars that are maybe a little longer, a little more elaborate than podcast episodes, let me know. If you have suggestions for future podcast episode topics, let me know. And please try to share the podcast show with any gay male friends that you think might benefit from this whole series. So thanks, and I'll see you next time.